Okay, how do I start? Jay, how do I start?
You're live on Facebook.
Yes, how do I start this?
No one is in here yet.
I have 17 people waiting.
Oh, they're waiting?
Yep.
So you have to accept them.
How do I do that? Oh, I see.
You see it?
Yep. Admit. Hello, everyone. I'm just getting... Wow. Okay. Hi, everyone. We're on Facebook. Okay, we are on Facebook Live as well, so you are welcome to join there. Jason Bronowitz is going to be monitoring there. I want to make sure, can everyone hear?
I can hear. Yes.
Can everyone see?
I can see.
Okay, great. So what we want to do is get everybody to mute, and then when it's time for questions and whatever, you can unmute yourselves when you're ready to ask a question. So thank you, Jason, for helping out, and thank you all for participating, and welcome to those of you who are on Facebook Live as well. Jason's going to monitor any comments or questions that come up on Facebook Live, and I'll do the best I can here to do multiple things. I'm at that age where I understand the technology. I'm just not really good at it. Okay. So everyone, I hope, is doing okay and holding up okay. I know that this is crazy times, and so I thought maybe we would do a little text study together. If you don't have mute on, I can hear some sounds. Just please make sure to mute yourself, and then unmute yourself when it's time to...
I'm muting everyone, so...
Oh, okay, great.
I will mute you for you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are going to begin. You can see I picked the topic, living in fear versus living with fear. And these are obviously troubling times, and you've heard it all a million times. So I want to sort of use Jacob, our third ancestor, who I think is, our third patriarch, who I think is the most well described and laid out character in the stories so far. Abraham, we sort of know, is very righteous, does exactly what God tells him to do at any given time, argues with God, and moves around a lot. Isaac does not move around a lot. He, in fact, never leaves Canaan, ever. And then Jacob is really the one who we see emotion from. And we learn that he is someone who is at sometimes a trickster, sometimes, as we know from the beginning of the story of Jacob and Esau, he's always out for one-upping his brother and tricking him into the birthright. And then later on, when he goes to Laban's house, he gets tricked, and then he's just a very complex character, like us. And so I felt like he's probably the best one to use for understanding a little bit about ourselves. So what I'd like to do is present the text. You'll be able to see them on your screen. If you have your own Bibles, of course, later on you can jump in with some commentaries that you may find are interesting. So we're going to start with, usually we start with a blessing, but I thought that we would start with this reading on the first slide that you're seeing, and I'm assuming everyone can see the slide. Those who sow in tears will reap in joy. It's the song of the dreamer from a dark place that grows. Like a flower in the desert, the oasis of our souls. Come back where we belong. You who hear our longing cries, our mouths, our lips are filled with song. You can see our tear-filled eyes. And I just thought with that in mind, we could begin, especially the part about the idea of dreamers. And the one who sows in tears will reap in joy is a very Jewish concept. Just read Job. And so at the beginning, at the outset, the message is, we're not the first to experience troubles and sadness and tears, and we're not the last. as we live through this snapshot, this very historical snapshot in our own history, let's go back 3,500 years and see what's going on with Jacob. But, of course, you had to throw in a little Shakespeare, of course. So, how do I get to the next slide? Up there. So I put in something from my favorite line from As You Like It. Sweet are the uses of adversity, which like the toad, ugly and venomous, wears yet a precious jewel in his head. And this is our life, exempt from public haunt, finds tongues in trees, books in the running brook, sermons in stones, and good in every living thing, which is not, which got cut off. Okay, let's look at this first text. So we've got Jacob. He has just run away from home at the request of his mama, Rebecca. He stole the birthright from Esau, and the most famous ladder, you know, because Jews don't really use ladders. We ask other people to do that for us. But the most famous ladder story ever is what we encounter here. He leaves Beersheba, he runs away, he's worried Esau's, gonna kill him. Rebecca says, get out of here, pack your bags and leave. What I've done is I put a little bit of Hebrew text in, and then I've bolded the parts that we're gonna look at dealing specifically with Jacob and his fear. Does someone wanna unmute and read for us, please? The English?
Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night. When the sun had set, taking one of the stones of that place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. He had a dream. A stairway was set on the ground, and its top reached to the sky. Angels of God were going up and down on it. And Adonai was standing beside him, and God said, I am the Eternal, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. The ground on which you are lying, I will assign to your, I think that's a typo, assign to you and your offspring. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember, I am with you, and I will protect you, and will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you.
Okay, thank you. Beautifully read. So there's a couple of parts that I wanted to point out from the English and from the Hebrew, I mean, and then we can look at them in the English. But again, the setting of this story is he's walking from Beersheba and he's going north. He's going to go to Haran, which is sort of the family home of origin. So, V'hinei anochi im ach. It says in the verse that starts with a taf and a vet, is this idea that God says, I am with you, imach, I am with you. And then it says, Ushmarticha bechol asher telech. I will protect you or guard you everywhere that you go. This is God's promise to Jacob. V'hashivoticha el ha'adama hazot, and I will return you to this adama, to this land, the land of Canaan. Ki lo e'ezavcha, because I am not going to leave you. Ad asher im asiti et asher dibarti lach, until that which I have made as a promise to you is fulfilled, is a different way of translating it. So there's two things that we have to assume that are going on here. One is that necessitate God making this promise, this vow, if you will, to Jacob. So if we go back to verse 10, we can see it says Jacob leaves Beersheba, he sets out for Haran. Great. He came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night. So this is at a time when there are no street lights, it's dark. And if you've been to Israel with me or on another trip and you've gone to the place that we, later on it's going to be called Bethel, that we believe is Bethel, it's in the middle of nowhere. So, and we also know that Jacob is a mama's boy and a homebody. In other words, he never left home. He was really in the tent all the time with mom. And so he's by himself. You want to talk about isolation? He is as isolated as you can be, and it's dark. And he's never been alone before. So when we think about scary, anxiety-producing moments, that's got to be up there, right? Like, it's dark, he's alone, he's in the middle of nowhere. And he stops in this place and he takes stones and lays on them, which I don't think are very comfortable, but that's neither here nor there. And so we have to assume that Jacob is lonely, afraid, and scared, and very isolated. So I think this is a perfect text for us to look at. So then he has this dream, because Jacob is a dreamer. His son Joseph is a dream interpreter, right? Joseph's the one who goes out and says to the brothers, oh, I had this dream. You were all bowing down to me. Joseph's the one who says to the Pharaoh, oh, here are these dreams. Let me interpret. The Pharaoh tells Joseph, my favorite song from the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Well, I was wondering. Okay, so he interprets the Pharaoh's dreams. He's the interpreter, but Jacob is a dreamer. So he has a dream, and he is in a virtual state, not a virtual, a real emotional state of darkness. And there's this stairway, a sulam, a ladder, a stairway. I don't think it really matters how we translate it. And these angels are going up and down and up and down and up and down. And God introduces himself or herself and says, as you could see here, about the offspring and the land, and I made this promise to Abraham and to Isaac. So let's look in particular at Ushmarticha b'chol asher telech. Why does God say to Jacob, using the word, I will protect you, b'chol asher telech, everywhere that you go or anywhere that you go? If anyone would like to chime in, why do you think God says those words specifically? You'd have to unmute. Don't forget to unmute.
Just to allay his fears.
Okay, so God intuits that he is scared. So he wants to allay his fears by saying, I will protect you everywhere you go. Anyone else?
What about God reinforcing the bond between him and Jacob and the Jews by saying, I'm the one who's going to protect you. You can rely on me.
Well, that could be definitely part of it. And the reason why, the only thing that I wanted to say about that is that don't forget this is his first time meeting Jacob. This is the introduction. So he's reinforcing that which he made with his father and his grandfather. And why is that potentially comforting? Or why would that be something that would also, going back to what Jeff said, why would that be something that would help also allay his fear or give context to this, invoking his father and his grandfather?
It gives him courage to go on.
How so?
Because he's bringing in the ancestors, and if he moves forward, the tribe will continue.
Mm-hmm. So somehow giving him a sense of continuity may be comforting.
Correct.
And what is it about continuity that gives us comfort, or gives Jacob in particular comfort? What is it when we're scared about something and we say to someone, hey, you know, it reminds me of this time that Grandpa was in the war. Like, what does that typically do as a coping mechanism?
Well, it's familiarity with your past, with things that felt good to you.
Right. It helps to bring things familiar, and you may have not even known Grandpa, but that's part of your birthline. So that's not only familiarity, but it's also a way of saying, hey, you know, you're not the first. You're not alone. You're connected to your ancestors. It's all good. But going back to Ushmarticha b'chol asher telech, I will protect you in all of the places that you go. Let's talk about b'chol asher telech and in the places that you go. What part of that is maybe comforting or allays, as Jeff said, his fears?
Well, I have an idea, at least.
Bring it on.
Maybe because his grandfather sort of was in a similar situation and had to go back in the same place sometime in the past, and had to go back to Haran as well, and had to deal with that family too. And it worked out pretty well for him.
Okay. So Jacob has knowledge that Haran is where the family is from, likely, right? That's where Abraham went when he lech lechad, which is a new verb I just made up.
Yes.
Maybe showing like empathy and like that he can understand.
Okay. I'm also trying to get us to a place where it says, or it at least tells us, that we're all telech. We're all on a road, on a journey. And so it would be nice to, one of the things that I think is making all of us the most anxious right now is, when will it end? Where's this going? What does it look like tomorrow, next week? When's it coming to Arizona? What's it going to look like when it comes to Arizona? All of those questions that we have. And then what does it look like on the other side of this, right? So God's promises is very much about the future, that, we often look for God or have belief in God during really, really scary, traumatic times, but also during joyous times. And in the middle, sometimes it may be hard to connect. So God's sort of saying, I'm not going anywhere. I talked about this a couple weeks ago in my drash, the Talmudic idea that God creates a cure before the disease, which is very futuristic. It's all about the cure exists. It's out there, but don't forget that there is a cure out there. It's just, we don't have it today. And that's all about human capacity and ability to find the cure or be the cure. So God is looking into the future, saying, I'm not going anywhere. So the next part, Kilo ezavcha, why does God then repeat it sort of by saying, I'm not leaving you? What's that about? I will not leave you. Again, remember,
Saying that you can always count on him to protect you.
God's reliable, eternally. Good. And what else specifically maybe does Jacob, as Jeff said, God's sort of intuiting what Jacob needs right now. So when someone says to you, any one of you, I'm not leaving you, what's the first thing you think of?
It's almost like a proxy, like this will pass as well.
That's definitely one way of looking at it, that this will pass as well. I'm consistent, I'm not going anywhere. But back to the other question, what typically is the mindset of the person who needs to hear, I'm not leaving you?
It strengthens their faith.
It could, if it's coming from God especially.
Or maybe just the concept of you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fear of abandonment.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I'm glad, who said that?
It's a reminder of God's love for us too.
Who said the fear of abandonment?
It was Tim.
Tim. We all fear, one of our greatest fears, I know for me, is, when someone says, do you have abandonment issues? Yes, I have abandonment issues. I don't know why. I'll have to go and, when we can be together again, find someone to figure that out for me. But seriously, abandonment issues, one of the subtitles I put is anxiety dreams. One anxiety dream that I know I have, I'm sure a lot of you have, is about being alone or feeling like someone has left.
Also, fear is exacerbated when you're alone.
You bet.
It looms so much larger when you're by yourself.
It's not good to be in your head for too long, right?
Correct.
And for those of us who are extroverts, we get our energy from being around people, right? And I'm not an introvert, so I can't speak for introverts, but for extroverts, like, that's what makes us feel good. That's what takes us out of our depression or out of our scary places. And I think that this great fear of abandonment or of being alone, is something I know has been exacerbated for all of us right now, because then we're in our head all the time. And for me, that's not a great place to be. So there are two reassurances that God is giving Jacob that I think apply today to us too. Number one is not you individually necessarily, but when you're in this darkness and in this loneliness and in this scary place, whether you believe in God or not, God is still the Shomer Yisrael, the guardian of Israel. And it may not feel that way, but that doesn't mean that it isn't. And the second thing is that even though we feel very alone, and that scares us, you're right, it exacerbates it. Nonetheless, God's not going anywhere. There is a constant energy that is with us. And tapping into it, feeling it, that's up to each of us individually. Any other comments about this before we move on to the next fun part of the story?
I think that the hardest thing is because we don't know when this is going to end.
Yeah, we don't. And that's, I think, for a lot of us, different. I don't even know what to liken it to. Our intellectual minds may know that it's going to end, but no other part of us does.
But it's not only when it's going to end, how it's going to end.
Yeah. If I was, I'm sorry?
I was just going to say it might be as the British felt during World War II. Like that would never end.
Right. Or how probably Americans felt after Pearl Harbor, which is, the president FDR suddenly declares war, and I'm sure, other than every 18, 19, 20-year-old thinking, oh boy, I'm off to war, thinking, oh, this is massive. Does this time feel bigger than us?
Well, this is Marty. Can you hear me?
Yeah, of course.
I have a little different view of this. Like everyone else, I've been watching television, but I've been getting C-SPAN and the news shows and looking at it a little more analytically since I have time to do it, and B, doing it any other way for me would go crazy. And so I'm looking at it in terms of the actors. And I'm looking at these various governors and the president, and without getting into politics, just the players, and sort of analyzing how they are handling their situation. Plus, having been a member of a healthcare board banner specifically for a long time, sort of being a critic, private critic, in terms of how things are going, plus and minus. And the same with the governor. He's got I'm feeling some empathy for him because he's got a big job, and I know some people say lock us down immediately, and some people say no, he's locked us down too much. The bottom line is I'm sort of playing these analytical mind games with myself, and frankly sharing it with my family for a learning experience.
And so what have you come up with? What are some of the takeaways for you thus far?
To get right into it, but to be brief, I think that in many ways, the president has mishandled this from a federal standpoint, and that's unfortunate. Frankly, that's going to cost us, I think, a lot of lives as well as a lot of time. On the other hand, he's focusing more on the economy and on the jobs and on the things that can be done. In other words, he hasn't shut things down. Same for our governor. There's a lot of things that you would say are non-essential services. I was driving around the other day and saw a lot of people on the golf course.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, wow, that's quite interesting.
But barbershops are open, nail places are open. I don't know. Some people think that's terrible because those are non-essential services until you talk to my, I'll just say, daughter or relatives, and they're saying, well, I got to have a hairdresser. And so it's just, I find it interesting, and I try not to get too judgmental, because if we get judgmental, then you go down a path. And if you go down a path that is judgmental, there's only one way to go, and that's to the end of that path, and then you're stuck there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've found it. I mean, obviously tragic, and I wish we would finish it off, and all would be well, which is, of course, not going to be the circumstances. But I am sort of watching the actors and seeing how they perform it, trying to learn from them.
Thank you, Marty. Going back to the the fears play into that too. It's very easy to be the side seat driver with leaders, and woulda, shoulda, coulda comments typically don't really get us anywhere. And so I think the last thing in the world that I would want to be right now is a governor. I can't imagine the amount of pressure and time and energy that it's taking to make the decisions, especially considering that this is totally different than anything that we've really experienced for what seems to be going to be a long time. There was a comment that I wanted to read. Someone said, if you're of a particular age and have serious underlying physical conditions anyway, you wonder if you'll die. And I think it's important to put that out there too. When you're hearing about if you're of a certain age or if you have underlying physical conditions and you get the coronavirus, you're as good as dead. And the news repeats that over and over and over again in real time. It's got to be incredibly scary. And you probably feel like, I don't know what about that God, but I don't feel like I'm going to be protected in that event. So I have to protect myself. There is also, psychologically speaking, this idea of fight or flight. And I think a lot of people get into that mode also. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to go out and live my life and, whatever happens, happens. Or I'm going to hunker down and buy every case of toilet paper that I can find. And so, we all cope differently. Jacob is, again, by himself for the first time. He's relatively young at this time. He's still pretty much a kid. So his fears are different, but nonetheless, he, by the way, wakes up from his dream. This will actually be the segue into this next text, and says something, and then I want to get some more comments, and then says this great line that we know well. Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Achein yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati. Behold, Adonai is present, is in this place, and I did not know it. And then it says again, Vayirah, and he was scared. Vayomer, ma norah, same root as you can see in the Hebrew. If you follow Hebrew at all, you've got the resh and the yud. One is norah, one is vayirah. Ma norah hamakom hazeh. Now the translation's interesting. How awesome. And then I put in parentheses scary because it's the same word. Hamakom hazeh, ein ze ki et beit Elohim. This couldn't be any other than the house of God. Remember, he's never met God before, so he's thinking, oh, I actually stumbled into God's abode. V'zeh shar shamayim, and this must be the gate or the, what's that called? The vortex into the heavenly realm. But I thought it was important to look at this again because it tells us on the last page, God's intuiting Jacob's fear and making these promises. And in these verses, Jacob is actually in fear, vayirah. He was scared. And he says, ma norah hamakom, how awful, how scary, how awesome, how profoundly terrible is this place. Now, why is he saying that? And is he scared from the dream? Do you ever wake up from a dream more scared than you were during the dream? Or is he scared from meeting God? Anyone?
Yeah, this is Marty. I've got a thought that he is using, like we all do, God as an anchor. In other words, you try to analyze the disparate activities going on as Jacob is doing, but he's relating to God in virtually every instance, maybe asking questions, maybe fearing, but always anchored.
Okay. So we can be anchored. That's what the word makom can be used as, that place that anchors us.
Yes.
Anyone else? Okay, I just think it's important to point out when we're scared to find a text from Jacob, our patriarch, that he was scared too. Being scared, by the way, can lead to all kinds of other things and manifests itself in different ways. I don't know if you've noticed. I've been also dealing with mourning my dad's death, although in many ways relieved because of the kind of life that he was leading, but nonetheless it's sad. But also there's this idea of emotional bandwidth, that our emotional bandwidth has been stretched for a lot of us, that we get angry or we get we say things that we don't mean, or maybe we do mean. People take risks when they're scared, and fear is more akin to sadness than it is to anger. Anger is just more organizing, So I think it's okay to be sad too. I think it's okay to be whatever you feel like being right now. So at least we can see that Jacob, we're not alone. Jacob is scared also. He gets scared too. Any other comments on this? Okay, let's go to the next. So now we're going to go to the other side of the story. The other side of the story is he's now, So the other side of the story is that Jacob is 20 years up in Haran. He works way too long for Laban. He ends up stealing a bunch of stuff, taking some stuff that was owed to him, let's put it that way, on the way out. And why doesn't someone, and he's about to confront Esau for the first time in 20 years. So he's probably just as scared as he was at the beginning of the story, which is in the other Parsha. This is actually from Parsha that was Parsha Vayetze, and this is Vayishlach. And he's sending messengers to go see Esau, and the messengers are saying, well, Esau's there with 400 men, which is like an army, and Jacob, as it says right in the beginning, again, the same word that we saw before, Vayira Yaakov Me'od, that he became very scared. Does someone want to read, please? Don't forget to unmute.
Jacob was greatly frightened in his anxiety. He divided the people with him and the flocks, thinking to himself, if Esau comes to the one camp and attacks it, the other camp may yet escape. Then Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, I am unworthy of all the kindness that you have so steadfastly shown your servant. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, else I fear he may come and strike me down, mothers and children alike.
Coronal and sagittal reconstructed images.
Huh? What was that?
Sorry, Lance, I cut you off. You can unmute yourself now. There was some feedback.
Lance, what did you say?
Pay no attention to that.
Oh, okay. So it starts out by saying, boom, he was greatly frightened, and in his anxiety, what does he do? What is his first instinct to do when he gets scared that Esau's coming?
Praise.
Nope. In his anxiety, what did he do?
He divides the camps.
So what's he doing?
He's dividing the camps to go from one other might survive.
So one might call that what?
Survival mechanism.
Yeah, I mean, this is a survival mechanism that we would call buying every roll of toilet paper that we can possibly find.
Or
Every
flattening the curve.
or what?
Diversifying the risk.
What did you call it, Steve?
Flattening the curve.
Flattening the curve, right? I need a plan. I'm scared, and the first thing I got to do is get a plan. We don't even take the time to think rationally. This is total fight or flight, right? So what he's doing is he's making a plan. How many of us in the last 3 weeks have made plans? I mean, you go to people's houses, well, you shouldn't, but I've heard anecdotally that people have quite a bit of toilet paper and water stockpiled in their houses. Enough that they'll never use it. Right? I mean, like, but it's yeah.
I was going to say, it's not uncommon or surprising that people would take refuge in a practical act. If you feel you're more in control, if you're doing something as a practical matter to deal with the situation.
Exactly. It is the, I think, greatest coping mechanism for fear is planning. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way, because it's the only thing that we can control. Like right now, what I'm sure we're all feeling is, I've got no control over this. It's a virus. It's a pandemic. I have no control over it. I have no control. There's no cure yet, right? Well, there is a cure, but it's out there. But I need to do things. I need to organize. I need to get my stuff together, because that's organizing. It helps me to cope. And again, 3,500 years ago, that's exactly what Jacob was doing.
Yeah, but 3,500 years ago is different today, and correct me if you disagree, but we know a lot today, and we're getting a lot of information. And sure, there's fear because I could be in contact with somebody I shouldn't be in contact with, but they have it, I get it, and then that causes trouble. But we also have, these mechanisms and all this learning from all of these doctors and medical people that have caused us to, if you have to go to the bank, you're 6 feet away from one another, or if you go to the store, you're 6 feet away from one another. At home, you know what you need to do from a hygiene standpoint. Families can cope with a small group if they need to get together, and they're not kissing and hugging. I mean, I think we've learned a lot. I'm not saying that it's perfect. It's clearly not perfect, and there's risk, but I think the risk is being minimized by offering solutions, at least ideas as to how we all cope with this silent killer. Is that too practical?
It's not impractical or practical at all. It's definitely an opinion that I believe is out there about rational versus irrational behavior, and about does the information sometimes help or harm. But going back to my point, and I don't think I think it's a different rationale, but I think the fundamental part of what we're experiencing now is directly related to what Jacob was experiencing, which is raw fear and fear of the unknown, right? The last time there was a pandemic like this was the Spanish flu, like none of us were alive. So the fear of the known, if there's a bad flu season, right? That's fear of the known. I hope I don't get the flu. It's a bad flu season. You can die of the flu. Or if I'm driving at nighttime on I-17, at least I know the I-17 well enough to know on those nights when I'm driving back from camp and the thunderstorm starts, and I know when to pull over. I know when, I have fear of the known. Fear of the unknown is incredibly challenging. Someone said, if you're a senior and don't have anyone to shop for you, then simply logical to have a lot of goods on hand so you don't have to go out for it. Also, someone who's had a very bad case of the flu for a few weeks had my husband gotten as sick as I would have, how would I have been able to get? But there's also a pragmatic piece to it, which is we plan in the event of this bad situation becoming worse. So I can see, Marty, I can see both sides of it.
I can't do it. By the way, I was actually fascinated by your title and the proposition of that extreme fear, because I happen to know some people that are near that, and I try to call them and comfort them, but as we all would. But I just happen to be experiencing more people who are trying to control their fears, because clearly that's the way they want to live. But no, I get the premise.
But that goes back to living in fear versus living with fear. And I think in this case, in the first case, Jacob, I think, is living in fear. He is nothing but scared. It's all fear of the unknown, and that's the link. Here, it's fear of the known. His spies, his shalichim, have already told him Esau's got 400 men with him, and they look scary, and they're tough, and he knows that this anger over 20 years has only built up over 20 years, right? It's fear of the known, whereas maybe in the first it was fear of the unknown. And that, I think, leads us to what is the premise of today, which is, do we live in fear or with fear? Hoping to get to a place that we live with fear. And part of living with fear is knowing to plan, and then knowing that you don't have a control over when this begins or ends, or when it ends in this case, but we're going to take data and information. Okay, back to this. So he asks God to deliver him from the hand of his brother, for he feared that he may come and kill him. And that's an awesome line also, because it's also got, I didn't put it in the text because we have limited time, but Jacob does a little bit of a negotiation also with God. Hey, God, you remember that promise that you made to me in the last Torah portion 20 years ago? Are we still good? Are you still shomering me? Are you still going to protect me? Are you still not going to leave me? I'm scared that my brother's going to come kill me. I just want to make sure that we're still on the same page. So he's very pragmatic, I think, with God. Some of the rabbis go off on Jacob a little bit for maybe losing faith and having to say it in the first place, but nonetheless, I think when we're scared, we want to say, hey, God, remember that deal that you made? What's going on? Okay. Any other comments on this?
Well, Jacob is both acting and being proactive, but also being passive. He was acting by dividing up his camp, but passive by waiting for God to preserve him.
Right, and I think that's really important, Mark. Like, you can't just sit idly by. You got to do something. You have to act. God doesn't do it all alone. We're partners. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yes. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, good. So here's this next famous story. I mean, look at all these really famous lines of Torah that we find in these sections. It says, Vayivater Yaakov levado, and guess what? He's alone again. And it's nighttime again, time for anxiety dream number 2. Does someone want to leave? Read, please? You can leave if you want, but if someone wants to read.
Sure, I'll read.
Thank you.
Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When he saw that he had not provoked him, he wrenched Jacob's hip at his socket. So the socket of his hip was strained as he wrestled. Then he said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But he answered, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Said the other, "What is your name?" Replied Jacob. Said he, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with beings divine and human, and have prevailed."
So in this sort of apex of this part of the story and of Jacob's life, there's a major fundamental transition that takes place. And that is manifest in the changing of his name. I want to talk about this person real quick from the commentary. I just want to read this a little bit, jump around, and then get some of your comments. So that first line is very important. It bookends perfectly the Vayetze. He leaves Beersheba. He goes to this place. He's alone. So Vayivater Yaakov Levado, and now he's alone at the other side of the story. 20 years later, he's alone again. And he wrestles with this Ish, which is just a generic way of saying a man. So here's the commentary. Who is this mysterious man? The classic commentaries are nearly unanimous in seeing him as evil, a malign force. He may have been, according to some commentaries, Esau's guardian angel. Before encountering Esau in the flesh, his spirit struggled with the spirit of Esau. He may have been the demonic guardian of this river near the Wadi of Jabbok, which is where this takes place. His purpose seems to have been to weaken Jacob on the eve of this great confrontation with Esau. Or this may account of Jacob's wrestling with his own conscience, and this is the one that I lean toward, because I think that's what anxiety dreams are mostly about, is our unconscious and our conscious coming into some sort of a conflict. Torn between his human tendency to avoid an unpleasant encounter and the divine impulse in him that urges him to do the difficult but right thing, which is to confront his brother. This position may find support in the text that comes later on, that you have striven with divine beings and human beings, that comes up later on. One other thing that I wanted to say from the commentaries is Rashbam, not Rambam, but Rashbam, sees God as sending an angel to wrestle with Jacob to prevent him from running away, as he may have been tempted to do so, fight or flight, so he's going to flight, instead of doing the right thing, which is having this reconciliation with his brother. So there's a lot packed into this, these few verses here. So I bolded the Vayivater Yaakov Levado, that he was by himself, and then later on, the whole transformation, this fundamental seismic transformation of his name from Jacob to Israel, right? Im Yisrael, that you will be Israel. Ki sirata im Elohim v'im anashim v'tuchal. And because you wrestled with, or you struggled with Elohim, God, plural gods, v'im anashim, and with humans, like your journey is complete, Jacob. You've had a full life. You've had a lot of manipulation, a lot of deception, a lot of tricking, a lot of struggle, a lot of pain, a lot of fears, and you succeeded. And so your name, our name, because we're Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, will now be Yisrael. So first I want to get any comments from you, because it again goes to this idea of being scared, and the message here, whether this being is evil or demonic or not, or whether it's Jacob struggling within himself, there is some resolution here in the name change. Comments? Questions? Ideas?
Well, the one thing I would observe is there's an opportunity to confront your fears, and I think God is setting up conditions. There are conditions at which Jacob can confront his fears as opposed to run away or hide.
Mm-hmm.
I think is an extremely important learning.
How so?
Well, because we have choices, and I know sometimes it feels like we don't when we're overcome with emotion. But, you know, we have choices, and we always have had choices. At least that's my belief.
Mm-hmm.
And we always will have choices, and therefore, no matter how bad it gets, it seems to me that we should, depending on where you're coming from, force yourself to make choices. In other words, think through it as opposed to just react like a flag in the wind. I see that as a proactive and a positive way to deal with virtually anything, including those things like we're going through right now. I mean, we have choices about what to do. People, just like everybody else's family here, my family's, all over various states, and most of them are inside and they're virtual, and they have choices. Mm-hmm. They can make the most of it, or they can fail to make the most of it. My judgment, I encourage them to make the most of it. And I think that's what we should be doing with one another. I know that's what our neighborhood is doing, and I know that's what our temple is doing. Rabbi, that's why we're doing this. Can't relate to one another personally, and I'm bugged about the Seder, but you saw an email from me and that, I think, or from someone. Anyhow, no, I think that the issue of choice, which is, as far as I'm concerned, God offers that. Life offers that, and as bad as it gets, and it gets bad for a lot of us.
Yeah.
We still have choice.
Yeah.
Unless from a health standpoint, I guess we don't. But for the most of us, like everybody on this, we have a choice. That's why we're here. I think that's a big deal.
Well, don't forget, studying Torah is the antidote to all things that are harmful and bad. So that's a good choice.
Absolutely.
Anyone else have a comment about this? Name change or identity change?
It's not unlike those of us who have converted to Judaism and we go to the mikvah and we choose our Hebrew name. Jacob was given a new name by God, and that again gave him a chance to start fresh and start new and move on.
Yep, that's a perfect example. And we say when someone goes through conversion that they're a Jew by choice. Jacob has to be in some ways, he has to become the man that he needs to become by choice. And the beginning part of the bookend is all about running away. And this part of the story is about engagement and not running away. And when, again, we live in fear, we typically run away. We do things that may not be as rational. When we live with fear, we still engage life. We still stand up on the beam on Friday night and do services to an empty audience, empty congregation, because it's not empty. I mean, people are watching us, but it would be very easy to just go and, what did I say? Social distancing isn't social isolation. When you become a Jew by choice, you're not just picking your name, you're picking an entire identity, which includes the history, right? You were at Sinai. You're no different than me, than any other Jew. You were at Sinai. You're part of the state of Israel. You're part of the history of the Holocaust and oppression. You're part of all of that. But Jacob is, in one way or another, and the commentaries seem to be pretty unified on this, that this is a confrontation he has to have with his fear. And so he says to the angel, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. And the angel says, fine. And this seismic shift takes place. And that's something that I think when we go back to the question of how do we come out on the other side of this situation that we're in right now, I wonder who will experience a seismic shift in how they see things and how they view the world, and who won't. What will change? What will be the same? Anyone? We have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to see if anyone had any thoughts about that. I'm sorry, I can't hear you so well. Yeah, that's better.
Interesting detail here. I tend to subscribe to your view. This is Jacob wrestling with himself. But there's an interesting detail here, which is that he wakes up with a damaged hip. And that's in there. I mean, obviously those words, that anecdote is in there intentionally. To credence to the idea that he's wrestling with something external to himself. So it seems to me that detail is important because it's to reaffirm not just that he's having this anxiety doing this internally, but that this transition is being given to him from something internal, reaffirming the presence of God as something external to himself.
Nice. Anyone else? So I want to, before we, yeah, please.
I guess both Steve and I are raising our hands, but maybe you're not using.
No, I can only, I have so many screens, but please jump in.
Okay. I certainly get the idea of choosing, especially for a Jew by choice. But I think it's interesting here that he really didn't choose his name. The angel or someone is saying, "Your name shall be." It's not Jacob's choice. So I think there's a component of responsibility. He's being assigned something significant and a responsibility. And I guess the parallel for us is that each of us has a responsibility to follow the guidelines to protect ourselves and others. So for me, the relevant component here is the idea of somebody giving him his name, and with that name comes responsibility.
Yes. And that responsibility ultimately becomes our destiny as Jews, right? Because we're the children of Israel. And so that responsibility includes, as you're, I think, alluding to, includes an acceptance of what comes along with that name, which is a lot of responsibility of, I think, I would argue, of living with fear, of utilizing our best selves, of understanding that we have a responsibility, a shared, the Talmudic dictum, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Bazeh, all of Israel is responsible for each other. We're all responsible for that. Goes with humanity as well. There's a lot of responsibility, and accepting not just the name but the destiny that comes with that is a very, very big deal. Absolutely. Jason?
Steve, do you want to add your comment?
Huh?
Oh, Steve Goldstein, do you want to add your comment?
Oh, I don't know where my comment screen went.
I just did want to add that as we're looking at how we're supposed to act and so forth, I think that's where the guidance of all of the study that we've been doing over the years or over the months or whatever it is that we've been doing, that it's not only the extra roll of toilet paper, but what's God's guidance? How are we supposed to act morally? How are we supposed to act among ourselves? I mean, other people have said, I guess I'm repeating what some other people have said, but this is where we have to really look for God's guidance. This is where the rubber meets the road as to how we're going to move forward over the next couple of months. There's parts of the Torah that say, if you remember, don't cut down, don't embarrass people in public. If you have criticism, take them aside. All of those moral issues that we've been studying in all these portions now come to fruition. I mean, how are we going to treat the person that we see standing there who doesn't have a name? Are we going to start screaming at them, or are we going to look at a leader and say, that's probably not what I would do, and then tweet to all of our friends what a this guy is, and why is he our president, or why wasn't he our president, or, all those things.
Yeah.
I think we have to look at the entirety of this thing and think about what we're doing.
Right.
Rabbi, I have something to say.
Sure.
Okay, so in Parsha Re'eh, it begins with the words, "See, I place before you today a blessing and a curse." And I heard that the Sfat Emet taught that those words apply to every moment of our lives. No matter where we are, we're always standing at a crossroads with a choice that passed before us. Life consists of one decision after another. So with that being said, we can earn blessings. But I also think that not only do we need to make good choices, but I think that we have to be the witnesses, like it says in Isaiah. It says, "My witnesses are you, declares the Lord, my servant whom I have chosen, to the end that you may storm and say, oh my gosh, the storm is really big. But we could also look at the storm and say, look how big my God is. I think we need to be witnesses. I mean, God brought us out of Egypt. I mean, we're coming on Passover where we recall the many blessings that God bestowed on us, you know, and delivered us out of, you know, slavery and everything that was going on. I think that at the core we need to have faith, but I think earning blessings and doing the right things and obeying the commandments where we can earn blessings so that God can triumph. But we have to be witnesses. I think we're called to be witnesses. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. I kept thinking Dayenu when you were naming all the great things. So I was starting to sing Dayenu in my head when you were talking about the Passover story. And that's all about perspective. And I think that's actually a perfect place to end. If anything, we should have some perspective on the value of life and the meaning of existence. And you know, it's to use another prophetic text, the idea of giving humility to the haughty and raising up the lowly. You know, the perspective is that we're all flesh and blood, we're all human, and we're all vulnerable, and we all have fears. And people, going back to Marty's comment, and I wanted to play off of what you said in the beginning there, it comes down to choices. The idea that you get a choice today and every day, a blessing or a curse. And then later on in the Torah, Nitzavim, can you hear me? Yeah, that's not the screen I wanted. I actually had a different screen. Yeah. The one that comes in Nitzavim of V'charta B'chaim, therefore choose life. That's the choice that we have to do, life-affirming things every single day. And I think that becomes very challenging when things are like they are right now. It's challenging for us to make the best and most meaningful decisions when we're feeling scared and our emotional bandwidth has sort of peaked. So I hope that we're able to do more of this, because human interaction is part of the cure. And studying Torah is part of the cure. And being a witness to God's greatness gives us that perspective that there was time before and there will still be time and space after us. So what I thought we would do today, we're going to do Lunch and Learn every week. And what's been really great is Rabbi Mason Barkin and the Cantor and I have been talking a lot about, and Jason, about ongoing things where we can Zoom Torah study every week. That's easy for people who can't physically make it to the room when we're all able to come back together. So, and then all of a sudden everyone realized that we've been live streaming for 3 years, services. So that's been kind of cool to see how many people are watching and engaged. So every Tuesday at noon, we'll be doing Lunch and Learns. Rabbi Mason Barkin is going to be doing coffee talks. And then someone had asked about Passover. We're going to put together some Passover delivery opportunities for people too. So that's all going to be coming out. Just keep checking your emails. But back to what Lori said, I think that we should end. We typically, and Jason sort of preempted me, which was smart, with the blessing that we do after Torah study. But I thought today, instead of the blessing over Torah study, we would do a prayer for these wonderful, amazing Americans who have been, with patients as they have been being treated and as they are dying, and who I think more than, God can take a week without us doing a prayer for Torah study at the end. God won't take this personally, but I'd like to ask everybody who can see to join me as we conclude in the prayer for caregivers, because I know now more than ever they need it. So please join me. May the one who blessed our ancestors be present to those who provide help for the ill and troubled among us. May they be filled with fortitude and courage, endowed with sympathy and compassion, as they give strength to those at their side. May they fight against despair and continue to find within themselves the will to reach out to those in need. And in their love of others, may they know the blessing of community and the blessing of renewed faith. Amen. Thank you all. Great job. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. See you soon.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're more than welcome. My pleasure.